I understand that Chinese politics is not on most people's mind right now, so it's probably not a good topic for the algorithm. But I want to share this report with you before I forget because I think it can put an end to my debate with a lot of people. During China's National People's Congress meeting last week, the government made an announcement which caused quite some mockery on the Chinese social media. So the premier said that they were going to raise the rural resident pension by, guess what? $3 a month. From $21 all the way to $24. He said it as some sort of an achievement. As I mentioned before, not just Americans, even most of the Chinese urban residents have very little awareness about how poor China's rural population is. They can't even fathom the actual level of poverty. So when they heard the report, they were like, what the fuck? We still have people living on $21 a month? And tell you what, even those $21 depend on the fact that you have paid premiums for a certain number of years. You wouldn't even get those if you never paid. You would just have to work for every penny until the day you die. I know some of you will start lecturing me that rural life doesn't cost much. People eat what they grow, all organic, no brain rotting screen time. Yay! If you think that way, I curse you to live like that someday. Like grow everything by yourself. How many ingredients do you need for a decent bowl of salad? You grow everything yourself? How about cooking oil, soy sauce, spices? And what about meats? It's okay, they have pigs. So what? They just butcher a pig and save the meat for the whole year. Is that the plan? And what about gas and electricity? What about the internet? What about furniture and appliances? They grow those too. And even for things they can grow, it takes strength and health. When you're old, working in the field is no joke. The main thing I want to talk about today is why China's farmers are so poor. You'll see how much China's trade has been growing. By the way, last year China had a record-breaking trade surplus of $1.2 trillion because Trump's trade war pushed a lot of trade partners to China. Trump should get a Chinese presidential medal or something. Such a good comrade. But anyway, China definitely can afford giving rural residents better welfare. But it won't. Here's why. In a country without elections, political accountability mainly comes from the threat of protests and riots. And guess who are most capable of organizing protests and riots? Urban residents, right? Especially urban residents in large cities. They live close to each other, they work in large groups, and they communicate easily through the urban infrastructure. And sometimes they interact with international reporters, including those white influencers on TikTok. So the Chinese government is much more careful about keeping urban residents happy, especially those in big cities, and especially in Beijing. Tiananmen really taught them a lesson. It was too close to home, and the effect rippled through the whole country. So since then, the Chinese policymakers have been offering enormous benefits to Beijing residents, like easy admission to colleges, enormous infrastructure investment, better hospitals. And every province also uses the same playbook and use their local tax incomes to prioritize their big cities, especially the provincial capital cities. That's why I was so impressed by the Hunger Games movies. Okay, that geographic stratification is exactly what China looks like. Of course, every big country has regional disparity. The United States, Brazil, India, Russia. But what makes China unique and most similar to the Hunger Games setting is that people aren't allowed to change their residential status. In America, if you are really fed up with your hometown, you can just try to find a job somewhere else and be done with it. It's hard but doable. But not in China. You can physically move anywhere in the country, but your welfare is tied to your formal residential area, which is called Hukou. There isn't a good English translation of the term because it's too unique, so I'll just use the Chinese name. So if you have a rural Hukou, you can't be like, I'm not looking forward to the stupid $20 pension. I'm gonna move to the cities and enjoy the city benefits. Nope, you cannot. Changing your Hukou from rural to urban or from a small city to a big city is next to impossible. You will have to get into a good college in a big city and find a posh elite job in the public sector or some big multinational firms to be eligible to apply for Hukou change. It's very difficult. What's even more outrageous is that if you give birth to a kid in Beijing, but you are a rural resident, your kid is still a rural resident, not a Beijing resident. Your kid can only go to school in whatever rural area your Hukou registration book says. So they probably won't receive very good education and probably won't find a posh job to change their Hukou when they grow up. And when they're old, they can only receive pension in that same rural area. So this shit is hereditary. It's like a caste system. This is why you rarely see marriages in China between urban and rural Hukou holders. They're like upstairs and downstairs in Downton Abbey. The Hukou system created a unique social phenomenon called the left behind children. We're not talking about the figurative left behind, the lack of resources and all. We're talking about children being physically left behind in the countryside when their parents go to work in the cities. They're not orphans, okay? But nonetheless, they have to live away from one or both of their parents because they can't go to public schools in the cities where their parents work. So they're physically and literally left behind with their grandparents and relatives who still work in farms. That kind of childhood is rough. Okay, they're not just poor, but the lack of parental care and protection is just brutal. According to China's official data, more than 60 million children have at least one parent who lives in a different city. That's 20% of all Chinese children. And among them, about 9 million live with neither parent because of the Hukou issue. Not because they are abandoned or orphaned or anything, just purely because their parents' work locations and their school locations are hundreds, if not thousands of miles away. So what I repeatedly try to tell you guys is that you won't understand the state of the Chinese economy without first understanding the geographic stratification under the Hukou system. The problem of not having elections is that the only way to make the government care about you is through the threat of protests and riots. But when you live in a sparsely populated rural area, you can't credibly threaten anyone with protests or riots. Maybe you can grab some buddies and smash some village party secretary's office, but nobody will ever hear about it. You'll just disappear into oblivion. Maybe a few social media posts will mention you and they'll be immediately deleted and forgotten. So a lot of Chinese miracles look so stunning exactly because the economic resources are concentrated and spent in urban areas. Those miracles depend on rural poverty. Here's another example. So China recently had some big achievement in controlling air pollution. When I was there, northern Chinese cities used to be immersed in smog all year long. Okay, it got much better in the last 10 years. How? Pretty simple. They banned coal in most places. That's good, right? But who paid for the cost? Rural and small town residents who can't afford gas. It was brutal. I don't have data on how many people were affected, but the anecdotal evidence shows that it caused serious health problems and even death in older population due to the lack of heating. they simply couldn't afford the gas bill. I'll put the link to this New York Times article down there in case you want to dig deeper. I keep pounding this issue because you can't expect a government to take care of you automatically without the threat of losing elections. You think just because China has a certain culture or a certain ideology or some version of socialism, I don't even know what it means. So just because these intangible big words, you think the government will automatically care about the people. That's Disney royal fantasy, guys. Sure, they care about part of the people who have the potential of causing them trouble, but not the farmers and miners in the districts. Okay, you should never pursue a political system without electoral accountability. Elections are like food. They don't always make you healthy, but a healthy society can't live without them.